I was selected in 1973 to begin the Army's Initial Entry Rotary Wing program. That is the first level of flight training for the United States Army. I served for 27 years in the Army, and during that 27 years I saw a magical transformation. I was at the beginning of what they called the Great WAC expansion, which not only opened fields for women in aviation eventually, but also women in all sorts of fields. The country had come to realize that their educated daughters were trained and raring to go in fields that had never been open to them before. It was not too many years later that I saw that some of these women who had been trained in the military and aviation, in helicopters and airplanes, had left the service and were flushing out the ranks of commercial aviation. Now that's not to say that I'm old enough to remember the first woman who ever flew, because I don't. Women have been flying for decades before I ever even thought of flying. They've been flying as personal pleasure, they've been flying for pay, and they had flown in support of military operations. It was, however, new that the Army was actively recruiting women to join the Army first, to be soldiers, and then to be trained in aviation. Well, I'm credited sometimes for kicking that door, but it's not so much I kicked down the door. It was the fact that the Army deliberately opened the door, and I chose to walk through it. I'm told I diminish how important that was, but to me it's just living life. You take on a challenge, you either like it or you don't like it. You take on another challenge, it's getting up every morning and going to work and doing the best you can and hoping that people realize you're doing the best you can and hoping it's good work. I never gave much serious thought to the fact that I was blazing a trail, but 27 years later, after many people had told me I had done so, I was able to look over my shoulder and realize that I was much more gratified by seeing so many women who had followed that open door, had even made it wider, had even taken on other doors to open in the aviation fields that I had not even considered. If I had gone down that path as the first, but the only woman helicopter pilot in the Army, it would have been a bittersweet experience. But as you'll see, there are women who have entered aviation not just as pilots, but in other fields, other disciplines, and they have their very own stories to tell too.
My name's Melissa Mathiasen, and I'm the chief pilot at Sikorsky Global Helicopters in Coatesville, Pennsylvania. Sikorsky Global Helicopters is primarily a completion center for S-76C++ and the S-92 Alpha. They also are a production facility, which means we manufacture the C++, the S-76C++. And later this year, we're going to put out our first S-92 that will be manufactured on site. In the flight office itself, we support the completions and production schedule. So if an aircraft is produced, manufactured here, we do all the initial ground runs and test flights for that aircraft, making sure it's airworthy and that it meets all the FAA requirements and manufacturer's requirements for those aircraft. Then it's going to go into our completion center, and it's essentially outfitted with the interior, the avionics package, the paint scheme that the customer wants, and any other special items that they want in the aircraft.
My name is Stacy Sheard. I'm a production test pilot for Sikorsky Aircraft Corporation. Basically, we're flying helicopters for the first time they've ever been flown. The production line of helicopters, this is their first flight. Might be the first time the engines are running in the helicopter. And so everything as far as tests, we do it step by step. As soon as everybody's signed off, all the mechanics, the avionics, everybody involved in building that helicopter, as soon as they've signed off that they're complete with their individual job, and the helicopter is presented to us after it's been fully inspected, then we go through a series of checks to make sure everything inside the cockpit is working and is operational. And then we pull it outside and we do our first ground runs. Once all the ground operations are done and we're satisfied that that helicopter is safe and it is complete, everything's working as it should, then it's time to commence the first flights.
Well, my name is Amelia Earhart, and I work here at Angel City Air. I also work for CBS and sometimes for KCAL, who are two stations in a duopoly together. And my title is basically breaking news aerial reporter in the helicopter. I sit in the back seat, and I'm also the camera operator, and I operate the HD Cineflex camera that's mounted on the front of the chopper. And basically, Chris and I, as a team, fly to any situation, whether it's traffic, breaking news, a weather shot, or just general morning news during the morning show. We fly together as a team, Chris up front, me in the back seat, and we navigate our way through to whatever's going on, and I shoot it with the camera, and then I talk over that picture.
Well, I'm a helicopter pilot for CBS here in Los Angeles. So what that means is I get up really early in the morning because I fly for the morning show, and I fly around Amelia Earhart, who is our camera operator as well as the talent for the morning show, breaking news, traffic. We do the morning show, Amelia and myself. So my job is to fly Amelia around to the breaking news or whatever story we're covering that morning specifically, and we'll be out there and be first on scene to get the coverage on the air.
My name is Mandy Haskins, and I'm a flight paramedic for Priority 1 Air Rescue. Being a flight medic, that means that we fly around in the helicopter and we go out and do search and rescue and pick up patients that are out in the field somewhere. It's really important in Alaska to have search and rescue helicopters for that simple fact that we don't have road systems everywhere like they do in the lower 48. Being able to hoist out of the helicopter is a really good way to be able to go in and get these people, because we go in, we hover above where they are, we can hoist down, we can either just hoist them back up, or we can put them in our litter system. We can start patient care on the ground, or we can start it in the helicopter.
Hoisting is a lot of fun. At first it was a little difficult when it was new. However, it's become a lot of fun because it tasks us with a challenge to maintain a very stable hover in one place with references that are different from when you're on the ground. You have a lot of visual references that help you maintain that hover, but once you get high and you may not have any sort of a reference like a tree or a rock, or you're we're over terrain that is falling away, it does make quite a different challenge for holding a hover. It takes a lot of concentration, and of course we've got teamwork in the cockpit. The pilot not flying is providing altitude, power information, because we can't really look inside the helicopter. We are focusing on our reference outside.
I own a helicopter company that primarily fights forest fires, and my job is making sure that everybody is operating safely and that our customers' needs are being met, and that everybody is operating within the regulations that they're supposed to be. I don't really think that there is such a thing as a typical day, because that's one of the things that's so interesting about this business, is it's so fast-paced and changing all the time. Just by the very nature of how a helicopter itself operates, it doesn't operate within the confines of airports and runways and those types of things. And so I find that overall the business itself is very much like that. So my days are not typical one after the other, and they can start very early in the morning and go until very late in the evening, depending on what time zones my crews are working in. And then in the interim, you do all of your normal regular day-to-day stuff like banking and things like that you do through a normal work day. So they can be very, very long and very full, but that's part of the appeal.
I'm Stacy Gandy. I'm an aviation maintenance technician for Air Methods out of Denver, Colorado. I hold an airframe and power plant license, and also I'm airworthiness inspector for the FAA. And I'm called an on-site mechanic. I'm here for this helicopter only 24 hours, 7 days a week. I generally work here about 5 hours a day doing inspections and any maintenance I need to do, and then after that I'm on call for the rest of the day. The helicopter doesn't always break here. you know, and it might be in a field or someplace where they have a hard time even giving you directions to get to. So it's kind of interesting in that it's not standard and you have to be very flexible.
My name is Heather Collins, and my title is Registered Nurse, Flight Nurse at AirMed. I work for Tampa General, and I basically have worked for Tampa General since 1975, and with this flight program since 1989. The duties here basically encompass nursing care of the patient as well as the aviation aspect of flight nursing. Okay, a typical call, it'll either be a scene call or an interfacility, and a scene call is when we go to the site of an accident and pick up the patients from there. They'll land us in either a field or whatever's close by to the accident. We'll receive the patient from the paramedics who've cared for the patient on the scene, get report, do any interventions that might need to be necessary to stabilize the patient. We'll load them up in our aircraft and take them to the closest trauma center or stroke center, whatever the most appropriate place is for the patient.
Well, my name is Caroline Kane. I'm a captain with Bristow Helicopters in Alaska. I fly Bell Helicopter 407 in a remote location on the north slope of the Brooks Range. I fly to pump station number 4, and it's located along the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. Working in a remote location, we only have about 40 to 45 people on site at Pump 4. And being such a remote location, you really need to get along with the folks there, or otherwise it makes for not a very fun work environment. And we're on a 2-week on, 2-week off rotation. You can drive to Pump 4 on the Dalton Highway, or the Hall Road it's called, but that can take about 8 hours, so that wouldn't be a very good commute. So we actually, Alyeska actually charters an airline, and we fly in every other Thursday. Current pilot duties and responsibilities include oil spill response, weekly pipeline surveillance. We do medevacs and external load operations, and also air support for the communication repeater sites. The area that Pump Station 4 covers 208 miles of the pipeline, and we cover from Pump Station number 1 to milepost 208. So they're all in milepost miles, pipeline miles. And the weekly surveillance that we actually do, we'll actually have an observer with us, security observer. We'll fly about 300 feet off of the ground, about 100 knots, so it's a lot of fun flying low like that, low-level flying. And the observer will then look out the window, check the integrity of the pipe, and make sure there hasn't been any changes.
My name is Shan Shope, and I am a seasonal contract pilot for Bristow, Alaska. I have been up here 2 previous seasons, and I've also worked tours, and I've done a little bit of EMS. But I think my passion is mostly in utility, and especially long line precision, long line type work. As a long line pilot, you have what they call an external load. So if you've ever seen a firefighting helicopter where there's a line that comes down below, and in firefighting you have a water bucket. But you can use that same technique instead of fighting fires with water, but you can maybe set air conditioning units on the top of a roof, or you can do all sorts of different things. And in my case, mostly I've done moving drills. So there's an exploration that's looking for coal, and you move these drills, and they have different pieces and sections that need to be stacked, and obviously they're too heavy for a person or 2 people to lift them, and they're in the remote locations of Alaska, so you can't haul in heavy equipment and tear up the tundra. So we do it all by helicopter.
My name's Amy Sargent. I'm with the Florida Keys Mosquito Control. I'm the chief pilot, and we spray for mosquitoes. We both a larvicide and adulticide, which means that we're killing both mosquito larvae and adult mosquitoes using helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft. When we larvicide, we have a spray system that puts out a granular pellet that it's actually ground up corn cob, and it has a bacteria on it, and the mosquito larvae will eat the bacteria that comes off this ground up corn cob, and it causes their stomach lining to rupture and killing the mosquito larvae. To adulticide, We use a liquid product that we spray out of the helicopter. We have 11 pilots here at the Mosquito Control. 7 of them are fixed wing, and they're just part-time pilots. And then there's 4 of us that are helicopter pilots. Our spray season normally runs from May to October. That's our busy season. So during the off season then, we do a lot of training. Everything we do is low level, right over the treetops, over wires, around towers. And I hate to use the term type A personality, but you do need to be a perfectionist. I think any pilot, most pilots are. It's required. I shouldn't say it's required. It's just, it's a skill that will help save your life, because you can't be wrong. You start making mistakes, and that chain of events is going to lead to an accident. So you need to be a perfectionist, and that's what we train for.
Helicopters are like thousands of little serial numbers that fly around together. You know, every one of these components has to be tracked, and people don't realize how really safe helicopters are because of that very reason. Every component has a time and a time life and an overhaul time. So the paperwork is really almost as important as the maintenance is in our jobs in the field, because it's our responsibility to maintain them according to what the FAA asks our company to do.